it has to be pretty egregious before I think a court is really going to say, yeah, we better switch medical because this kid might have this disorder. And I do want to throw out there, the judges may not be as educated as they need to be about some of these diagnoses because they are being seen as in vogue or more of a fad. And we go through cycles like that, right? There for a while, everybody had bipolar, now everybody's a narcissist. I think once these terms become so ubiquitous, judges roll their eyes and go, yeah, everybody has a sensory disorder now.
Right.
And they oftentimes don't take it seriously when it really does present. So let's throw that out there, that it's possible that our courts are not as educated as maybe they need to be about some of these issues. Hey listeners, just a quick note that Hump Day Wednesdays have begun again. This is a weekly support group for those who are dealing with impossible co-parents and want to chat about their issues and get encouragement from each other. To join us, you need to become a Patreon VIP listener, which is really easy, and it's only $10 a month. So follow the link in our show notes to register. By the way, you might want to do that from your laptop, desktop, or Android, since Apple is now charging extra when you use an iPhone or iPad to pay for products and services. How dare they? Anyway, I hope you'll join us each Wednesday at noon Eastern Time for an hour of good info and great company. See you there. Hey, this is Diane Dirks.
And I'm Rick Voiles.
We've been working with co-parents in conflict for more than 2 decades. We've taught classes, written books, counseled parents, empathized, and agonized a few times to help people make sense of their complicated families.
We were talking one day, and it occurred to us that helping the most difficult cases comes down to one simple concept. Is one parent willing to let go of the tug-of-war rope, or is it worth it to hold on and fight?
So we invite you to take this journey with us each episode as we tackle the questions, should you hold on or let it go?
Welcome to Co-Parent Dilemmas, where we give you practical solutions to those impossible co-parents. And it's another podcast, Diane.
Another season 5 episode. I'm so excited.
I know.
Now I wish, even though it's September, I wish the weather would cooperate. It's still hot on the island, but
yes,
it will eventually. And then it's going to get cool and we're going to go, oh, when is it?
That's right.
We're
never
so fickle as humans.
Yes,
right?
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So a couple of things I want to mention before we get started on today's episode. First of all, back in August, we did the workshop for parents who have kids who have narcissistic parents on the other side and how to help them. And I thought it was pretty successful. What do you think, Rick?
Oh, yes. I thought it was really good. And the content, the slides that you presented were just, I thought, awesome. That's an excellent presentation.
And we had some really good questions. A lot of the time at the end was, our participants asking us unique questions that we answered. So like all of the other workshops we've done, we will be putting that up online probably sometime next month that we will have that. But if you go to our store, so go to cpdilemmas.com/store. Is it store or shop? Now I forget. One of those. I think it's store. You'll see the link to the other workshops. What I do with those is I take the audio and marry it to the PowerPoint so that you'll see the power. You won't see our faces. You won't see participants, but you'll see our PowerPoint with our voices behind it so you can follow along with the PowerPoint. And it is there for purchase. If you are a VIP member, let us know if you want a copy of that and you'll get that for free. But if you're not a VIP member, there is a charge for different prices depending on which one. So check out the ones we've already done. And then sometime in October, you can download the one that we just did in August.
Cool.
So this week, Rick, we've got a question from a listener. Her name is Mindy. And I've already kind of answered her via email, but I thought that this was worthy of doing an episode on because at first glance, when you read the email, you're like, this is a problem, but is it really a problem? It sounds like two parents are fighting over something somewhat insignificant. But the
Yeah.
more that I thought about it, the more I realized it's so common. So on this show, we don't just like to talk about dramatic things, and occasionally we get really heavy, right?
Yeah.
This isn't what I would call a dramatic issue, but that's not why we're here. It's a common issue. So I want to discuss it because it's probably everybody that is listening can relate to this.
So it sounded dramatic to Mindy.
Well, yeah, because it's
Yeah.
personal to her, but in the larger scheme of the things we typically
Right.
put this up against, an
Oh my gosh.
alienating parent or,
Yeah.
some of that pain, you're like, just figure it out.
Right.
But and Mindy, I'm not minimizing the importance of what you wrote to us, but I
Right.
do want to say that it is more probably critical in your mind than it might be in your kids' minds.
Right.
And that's really where I want to focus today's episode on. So I don't want to read her entire email because it's quite long, but I'll give you the highlights. She says, my ex and I share legal custody. The kids' doctor's appointments, even when dad and I were together, always fell onto me about 95% of the time. So she starts it out like, yes, we're divorced. And I later learn, she doesn't say this exactly, but it's evident that in the divorce, dad got final say on medical.
Sounds like it. Yeah.
Yeah. But she's setting it up to let us know that I was the one always doing the medical during the marriage, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the setup. So she said, I waited almost a year for him to get kids to dental back in 2018, and he never did. So I just went ahead and informed him where I was taking them, and he had no issue with the dentist I chose. So the kids for the past 5 to 6 years have had the same dentist, fairly routine appointments. There were some gaps with COVID and dentist office overbooking with timely appointments, but they were made. And so for the last 5 to 6 years, they've been doing this same dentist. And then she said, then we had a cleaning scheduled for October for our two youngest girls who are 16 and 10, and his son is an adult now, so he's on his own. Her ex informed her that he was switching dentists for the 10-year-old. He refused to tell me where, what time, date, dentist, and also 30 minutes from my house, unlike the other dentist who was closer to her. And he only attends 5% of the appointments anyway, and he's been to the dentist one time only because the appointment fell on his time. So she's like very frustrated now. Why, after all these years, do you feel like you need to switch the dentist? Maybe because it was more convenient to his home. I suspect something else was going on in their co-parent relationship, and this was his way to exert some control, right?
Right.
I don't know, but that's what it sounds like.
For all I know, he could be dating a dentist at this point.
Yeah. And then she goes on to talk about more of the history. It's extremely difficult for him to allow me to get the kids evaluated. For example, she wants her daughter evaluated for ADHD, and he refused to do that. And then it took him 3 years for him finally to say, well, okay. But he still doesn't accept that this is something that she needs. She says once he was kicked out of the ER for not following their rules, and the police had to come. So there's been a lot of drama around medical stuff for some reason. Okay. So when he made the appointment with the dentist, she canceled the appointment when she figured it out that her daughter was going to go somewhere else, which is probably not a good thing to do if the other parent has final say. But she said, I told him that we already had an appointment and had a dentist, and we have 50-50 legal custody, and they didn't have my agreement for her to go there. So I'm not sure what state they're in, but she has this perception, since we have 50-50 custody, that we have to agree. But I think it has to do with who has final say. So there's some holes and gaps in her in her email. But anyway, so she canceled the appointment, and he rescheduled it and then refused to tell her when it was so that she couldn't go. Anyway, she says, finally, I feel like this is a contempt issue. I feel like with all the disagreements for healthcare, and I already took him to court once to reinstate talk therapy for my child that he pulled the child out of. Is this enough to work towards me having medical custody? And I'm interpreting that to mean final say on medical issues. I've never really heard a term medical custody, but I think I know what she means.
Yeah.
So what's your first thought about this, Rick?
My first thought is that there's something else going on here besides the children's teeth.
Yeah, there's a
That
power struggle going on.
yeah,
Yeah.
because I want to ask, why does mom want this kind of control on this kind of issue? And are there other areas where she seeks or has control? For all I know, this is the only control he has in life,
Maybe.
from her. And the only chance he feels, okay, I get to make some decisions in my children's lives. So why is this so important to her? And teeth doesn't seem to cover it.
Yeah. The most disturbing thing in this email is that they're at the emergency room with a child and the police had to be called.
Yes.
I mean, it's bad enough I'm at the emergency room. It's
Yeah.
scary. That's scary for the kids. It's scary for the parents. I don't know what the visit was about, but let's say, it's a broken bone. And now I'm sitting here in pain as a kid, and my parents are fighting to the point where the staff at the ER has to get, the
The
security
police.
policemen
Yeah.
involved. That would be, I would be so embarrassed. I'm sorry, these are my parents. Or
Oh,
I'm
me too.
sorry, this is my dad. I don't know if mom was involved in that altercation or if he was just getting upset with the staff and they called the police on him. I don't know. But that's just not okay.
No.
So there's obviously a lot of tension around medical. However, and I said this to Mindy in the short email that I responded back, but I wanted us to explore it a little bit further, is that there really has to be a focus on how are the kids viewing this versus how you and dad are viewing it.
Yes, that's
You
what I
know,
would want to do.
so if a child didn't know any better and dad just said you're going to a new dentist and the child goes to a new dentist, is the child going to feel slighted, hurt, suffer in any way, or is the child just going, okay, unless the dentist is a really harsh dentist who pokes and prods and hurts the child,
Mm-hmm.
the kid doesn't care
No,
which dentist.
the child's only going to be bothered if they're sitting there wondering, oh, how is mom going to respond to this?
Right.
And that's exactly what we don't want.
Right. And, if it's serious dental surgery, yeah, it matters which doctor is going to do it. And you want to make sure you get a doctor you trust. But if this is a cleaning or even a
Mm-mm.
filling,
Right.
dental works pretty, similar across the board.
Standard. Yeah.
Right. I know there are some dentist office that are scams kind of where they try to get you to buy all kind of services and, but they still are doing dental work. They're just they're like used car salesmen trying to get you to buy all this special, services you don't really need. But to get a basic cleaning, x-ray, and even a filling isn't rocket science.
Right.
So your child can probably be okay with that. It sounds more like Mindy doesn't want dad to think this is okay to do from now on. So this is
Yes.
punishment for dad.
Yeah.
I'm going to cancel that appointment and I'm going to make another appointment and then he's going to cancel my appointment. And I don't know how much the kids know that that's going on in the background, but I
Wow.
suspect they probably know something is
Sure.
up with these dental appointments, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking about the ADHD evaluation for the daughter. This is a very common issue, right? We hear it a
Mm-hmm.
lot.
Yes.
I think my child is autistic at some level or on the spectrum, or I think my child has ADD, and sometimes they have both, or they have OCD, or, they have sensory disorder problems. Some of these more nuanced evaluations and diagnoses that we have now that we didn't have 10 years ago
Right.
get really put to the forefront. And now, teachers are more aware, and that's good because that means we will help children learn differently and they can get special help. But it also becomes something for the co-parents who are not getting along well to weaponize.
Yes.
And the question I want to ask our listeners who are in a situation like this, where you feel like, well, she won't let me go get the evaluation. And if I don't get it, my child won't get the special services that they need or the medication they need. Oh my gosh, they're not going to be okay. I really want to ask, is a court case better than your child not having that service
Right.
for the children?
Yeah. Yep.
So let's explore that, because this is a hold on or let it go issue, I think. Because
Yeah.
she's specifically asking me, is there enough here? My answer to her was, I can't tell you that. You're going to have to talk to an attorney to find out if you have enough evidence to present to a judge to make it worth your while to go to court. I can't answer that, but your attorney may be able to answer that for you. But to me, it's really not about that.
No.
So what happens to a child when parents decide to go to court over this issue? I'm not saying absolutely, but what are some of what's the downside for the kids if parents decide this is a court issue?
Yeah. And especially a 10-year-old. I know, the 16-year-old's going, my parents
they'll be
are
gone
so
in 2
dumb.
years.
But
a 10-year-old has another 8 years of school where they
Yeah.
may need special help or extra help or medication or whatever.
Yeah, maybe.
But I want to let's isolate this issue of what can happen if you go to court, and how can that be hurtful to the children. And then we'll talk about how it is hurtful to the children if you fail to get the right dentist or that you fail to get the right evaluation.
Yeah, that's good. And she doesn't tell us how, I don't think she said how long they've been divorced, but the first thing that's going to go through the child's mind is, oh my God, here we go again. Or this is about me, my teeth, and I'm the cause of all of this. And, oh, if I just didn't have any teeth, my parents wouldn't be fighting. And just the pressure of being stuck in that middle between, I'm going to dad and he's all upset about mom, and now I have to deal with dad's wrath against mom, and then vice versa. That child's life is miserable.
So we have to ask, though, how much would the child know about court? And given the fact that she has said police have had to be called and they're canceling each other's appointments, leads me to believe this is the kind of situation where the kids would know from somebody.
Right. Yes.
Now, if we had them in parenting coordination, because I've had couples like this, they would both tell me, oh, we don't say anything to the kids about it.
Right.
And then I talk to the kids. The kids might not have court details, but they know for sure.
Absolutely.
Parents are fighting.
Yep.
Then I go back to the parents, and I always tried to keep what the kids told me confidential because I wanted the kids to talk to me. So I never told the parents what the kids told me, but then I would say, you're an idiot if you think your kids don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Because I just talked to your kids. They didn't tell me specifics, but they know. They can sense it. They can feel it. They know that things aren't okay between you, and it probably has something to do with these dumb dental appointments. So don't be deceived in thinking because you haven't sat your kid down and said, well, we've got to go to court now so that this doesn't happen anymore, that they still aren't aware of something going on that's not okay. So what you say is exactly right. They're going to think, well, now it's my fault because I said I didn't really want to go to a dentist appointment. I didn't care which dentist. I don't want to go to a dentist appointment. Now they're fighting about it. You know what I mean? They turn on themselves. Let's talk about the financial output of going to court, and does that hurt children?
Oh, gee. Yeah, because eventually you're at, well, I can't afford that activity, extracurricular activity, because I don't have any more money. And
or one parent says, because your mom's taking me to court, I can't afford that.
Yeah. It's maybe that blatant. And it is a lot of money. It's an awful lot of money to go back to court for both parents.
Even on an issue like this might seem paramount to you at the moment. And again, I'm not discounting that this isn't problematic at some level for the children, that they don't get proper dental care or whatever. But what I heard mom say in this email is that he somehow got medical custody or final say on medical, and then he didn't proceed to make the regular, appointments that you make to get your teeth cleaned, preventative work. And she
Right.
just said, well, I'm going to do it because he's not doing it. And that makes perfect sense. And you want your kids to have that. But then when he came back and said, no, we're going to the dentist. It's, a short walk from my house. I think at that point, Mindy would have done better to just let that go. Okay, I'm just glad they're going to a dentist.
Right. That would be, well, that's what I would point out. I've seen parents that won't even take a child to anything medical, and there are severe consequences.
Yeah.
She's at least got the good end of this, that he's willing to take her.
Well, no, he was willing to make the appointment. It sounded like she was still going to have
mom
to
has to take her. Okay.
And,
well,
I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he did make an appointment on mom's time without talking to her about it. Now, it didn't work with her calendar. And maybe that's why she canceled the appointment, which would make sense. But still, I think taking that issue alone to court probably is not worth the financial output and having the kids somehow stuck in the middle of a court case.
So I if I was parent coordinating with this one, I might go on and say, yeah, he can schedule the appointment, but he needs to take her. If he's just doing this to punish mom and give her extra miles that she has to drive, that would put a stop to that.
Well, what he needs to do and what he's willing to do are two different things.
That's true.
Yes, he needs to take her, just like he needs to not have the police called in the ER. But, there's nothing mom can do to control that. So
that's true.
He should take her. But if he's not going to take her, then, mom, I think what mom may have done is canceled the appointment with his dentist and remade an appointment with her dentist. She should have rescheduled the appointment with the dentist he chose, because
that's true.
Apparently he has that decision-making power. An attorney may tell you that changing that appointment was actually a contempt on your part. I don't know.
On your part. That's right.
So unless your child's teeth are falling out, I think the dental stuff is really an issue that you probably ought to let go.
Yeah.
Unless there's a major issue that you really need a particular type of professional to do the work, I think you need to let that go. Now let's talk a little bit about the ADHD evaluation, or any type of evaluation. And we've heard this so many times, Rick, where a parent is told by a preschool director, we think your 2-year-old might, be on the spectrum. We can recognize some of those symptoms early on now. Now we know more about it. Probably ought to have them evaluated. And, that parent tells the other parent, and they're like, no, my child is fine. We're not going to do that. And it becomes this battle, unfortunately. Same thing with ADD. It often shows up in elementary school, and maybe a teacher says, there probably ought to be an evaluation. He or she really is having struggle paying attention or staying on track or focusing on the work. And, it might be helpful to just identify this. What is it again? Is it better to go to court over that? Or is it better to find other ways to deal with the symptoms?
It depends on in what ways the alleged problem is affecting the child's performance in relationships at school.
So say more about that. Give me examples.
Well, I mean, if the child is, having extreme outbursts because over sensory issues going on, that's going to be affecting, obviously, the dynamics in the classroom for the teacher, but it's also going to affect the other kids. It's going to affect my child's ability to have good relationships and be in a social setting. And if medication could fix that, well, that would be worth pursuing. Mm-hmm. But if it's just, I say just ADHD, if it's a matter of attention and we can find other ways to create focus and discipline and have another parapro teacher sit with the child, and if there's some accommodations we could create without having to force the school into some kind of legal action to get it done, then let's do that.
Yeah.
that instead of going to
there are a
court.
lot of steps that can be taken prior to litigation.
Yes.
And I think when parents use these kinds of issues to go to litigation, I believe underneath of that is a deeper issue between the co-parents.
Could be. Yeah.
Because instead of taking the steps, they just go right to, well, I'm going to go to court.
I'm
They're
going to
either
go-
not, they're either naive and thinking
Right.
that the court, I mean, think about it, Rick. You and I have been doing this decades. How many court orders have you read over the years that have demanded that a child be evaluated for one of these disorders?
Oh, I can't think of one.
They may have had two.
Yeah.
That was such a severe issue that the court or the judge said, yeah, I've heard from 3 different professionals that this child needs help. It really is not, and I'm not an attorney and I don't sit in the courtroom all the time, so I may be wrong, but I have read hundreds of court orders over the years, right?
Right.
And rarely have I seen, hardly ever, you say never, a judge ordering this because it was brought to court.
Right.
So I only say that as a matter of personal experience to say, if you're not taking other issues to court besides this might be a waste of time and money. And I'm assuming that's because once the court gives a parent final decision making on something like medical, that court assumes the parent is talking to pediatricians and teachers and doctors and is making a valid decision about it. And I think it has to be pretty egregious. You know, my child has had 3 broken bones and dad just said it himself. So, you know, then maybe I need medical care. You know, like it has to be like something really out of the ordinary that is seen kind of abusive before I think a court is really going to say, yeah, we better switch medical because this kid might have, you know, this disorder. And I do want to throw out there, the judges may not be as educated as they need to be about some of these diagnoses because they are being seen as in vogue or more of a fad. And we go through cycles like that, right? There for a while, everybody had bipolar, you know, now everybody's a narcissist. I think once these terms become so ubiquitous, judges roll their eyes and go, yeah, everybody has a sensory disorder now.
Right.
And they oftentimes don't take it seriously when it really does present. So let's throw that out there, that it's possible that our courts are not as educated as maybe they need to be about some of these issues. However, that doesn't mean that a parent can't take several steps prior to going to court to take care of the child. So for me, the number one step is for you to get consultation. If you think your child has sensory disorder stuff, you're probably right because, you know, kids with those issues present very differently than other kids. An ambulance goes by and they hold their ears. You know, they being in a movie theater and it's really loud. You know, I remember I had a kid in my office where I had a whiteboard. As soon as I uncapped the marker, she just like put her hands over her face and said, oh, I can't take that smell. And that was one of her. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, I got to be sensitive to that because this kid has sensory issues. And one of them is smell. So it could be touch, it could be smell, it could be hearing, it could be all 3, you know? And so it's a thing. These kids prior to us really understanding this were just seen as kids who were dramatic or out of control.
Right.
So for instance, and I know this isn't Mindy's issue, but for instance, a child with sensory issues, one parent may really recognize it and be sensitive to it and go, yeah, we really need to pay attention to this. The other parent just sees that kid as out of control and needs punished because they scream when there's too much noise in the room, or you know what I'm saying? And so there's a very different way of parenting a child like that. So that can be very frustrating to the parent who understands the issue versus the parent who just wants to punish the child for acting out when things aren't perfect.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that the one that understands the issue just takes him to court. The court might then not understand the issue, right?
Exactly. I've seen it. Yep.
So the one who understands the issue may need to get consultation on her own or his own with a professional who understands the issue to say, okay, what can I do in my home And then, like you and I have talked many, many times, I suspect the other parent's probably going to complain to the understanding parent and say, well, she spent all weekend in her room because, she was acting out because she was saying she didn't like something that was going on, or she didn't like how her socks felt on her feet. And I just, to which that parent can say, well, this is what we're doing in my home, take it or leave it. But here's what we do. And it seems to work really well with her. Remember, start with a little bit of not accusation, but education. So she's not saying, oh, you idiot, why are you punishing our child? I've told you she's got sensory issues. You say, no, here, because he's going to complain or she's going to complain about the child in their home because they're going to act out, because that's what sensory kids do when they don't feel like their needs are being met.
Yep.
They get upset. They seem irrational. The other parent's going, what? What's the problem? All I did was put the lid on the pan and now you're screaming at me. So I think that the parent who understands the issue after maybe getting some consultation with a professional on his or her own can do some light education with the other parent, especially when they complain. When the other parent says, well, she spent all weekend in her room because I was punishing her for such and so. And then you can kind of gently say, well, here's what we've done in that situation, and it seems to work better. And that would be a first step, right? To do some non-accusation education that doesn't sound like you're being a know-it-all, but affirming, yeah, this has been a problem in my house too occasionally, and this is what we've done, without using the label sensory disorder, because I find that a lot of parents don't jump on the bandwagon for these things because they don't want their kid to have a label.
Exactly. Yep.
Which makes sense to me. I don't like labeling kids either, but nobody needs to know that label but you. You don't even have to tell your kid this is your issue.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, when I was 6 years old, I developed childhood epilepsy, and I would faint. I didn't have the grand mal seizures, but I had the petit mal seizures, and I would just stare into the, I'd be at the dinner table and I would just stare. And my mom said I would stare for like 5 minutes, not be there, wow. And then I would fall out. So she took me to this old country doctor, I remember. And they did a EEG on my brain and decided I had this epileptic thing going on. And so they prescribed me anti-seizure medication. My mom never told me that. And I took this medication every day. And I would say, what am I taking this for? And she'd say, it's for your eyes. It's so you can see better.
Oh, wow.
And I remember going to my friend's house, and I assume my mom told the other parent what was happening, and I would go to my friend's house for a sleepover, and, the mom would say, here's your medication. And my friend would say, what are you taking that for? And I would say, I don't know. My mom says I need it for my eyes. I totally trusted my mom.
Wow.
Which is interesting when you think of that. Do you know when I found out why I was taking it? I was about 16.
Huh.
And I was still taking it. I was taking such a small dose. It couldn't possibly have helped me, because eventually I grew out of it. It's the kind of, that's why they call it childhood epilepsy. You grow out of it. Your brain grows and it changes and heals itself.
Huh.
But I was about 16 years old and I was getting ready to get my license, and found out that they weren't going to give me a license because I was taking this anti-seizure medication.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, what the? And so my mom took me back to the doctor, and I had another EEG, and they determined I no longer did have this issue. And the doctor said she's been taking this medication all of her life, but it's such a small dose. It wouldn't, she probably grew out of it a long time ago, probably in puberty. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so they gave me a clear thing. And then that's when my mom said, well, it's this thing called childhood epilepsy. I just never wanted to use that word epilepsy because she was afraid there would be a stigma for me.
Sure.
And I really appreciated that. I even have a memory of my mom stopping at my dad's work site. He was a contractor. The day after that appointment, I was only 6, but this was a memory because, and this is why I want to tell listeners, even at a very young age, kids are very perceptive. Mm-hmm. I had gone to get that test, and my mom stopped at my dad's work site where he was building a home, and they talked, and I sat in the car and I watched them, and my mom did not look okay because she had gotten that diagnosis from me. And I remember thinking, there's something wrong with me, but I don't know what it is.
Wow.
And then she got back in the car and she was perfectly fine. And we went on with our day. And I just never asked because I thought, well, I guess she'll tell me if something's wrong.
Mm. Oh, man.
And I tell that story because how important is it that you protect your kids from these emotional things? Whether it's a diagnosis that maybe they just don't need to know about, they don't need to have that label because some kids, depending on their personality structure, will play a victim and use that as a manipulation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Other kids will think I'm broken.
Yeah.
Just depends on who they are as kids. And it's really okay to say, yeah, I'm going to give you this medication because it helps you feel better. It makes you feel like you're normal and you don't have to act out, feel like you have to get so angry sometimes. You don't have to say this is anxiety and depression medicine because you're not okay. And this has kind of morphed into something I didn't expect it to morph into. I think it brought to mind something that I think is important.
Yeah.
So I want to say to Mindy, all those issues with ADHD, it's an issue, but it's also on a continuum.
Yeah.
Your child is mildly ADD or ADHD, then there are a lot of steps along the way that you can take with the help of a professional to figure out how to manage their symptoms, even if they don't get them managed well in the other parent's home.
Yeah.
They're still learning from you how to do it. And the other parent may ridicule you and, oh my gosh, she puts headphones on our kid to go to the movies. That's crazy. Okay, whatever. Let them think that.
Yeah. Who cares?
If that's what your child needs and it serves their purposes, and they won't be embarrassed by it until they go on their first date.
Let's go to the movies. No, let's not.
And their date goes, what's the headphone for?
Right.
I mean, but by that time, we hope they have learned how to manage their symptoms a little bit better. And, they keep a little set of earplugs in their purse and, put it in their ears and no one notices. So we want to teach kids how to manage it on their own by first managing it for them. And if the other parent doesn't get it, they don't get it.
Yeah.
I weigh that against taking it to court and causing all kind of brouhaha around court and risking that the other parent says, well, now I can't buy you those shoes because your dad's taking me to court. I don't know. Like you said, sticking them in the middle, even though parents think they won't. I was 6 years old and I knew what was happening.
Yeah.
Very perceptive.
I used to say this in the classroom when I was teaching the seminar. I hear a lot of parents say, well, I'm fighting for my child, and that's their excuse for going to court.
Yeah.
And I say, well, yes, but do you understand that it's the fight that hurts the child?
Yeah.
So the very perception that I'm going to make my child better by fighting needs to be looked at more closely before you make that decision.
I'm not minimizing the issue as much as I'm saying, really, really think about it from the child's perspective. Which is more beneficial? And it might be a tough call.
Yes.
If your child is really suffering and multiple professionals are diagnosing and saying this child really needs support and the other parent is just being clueless, you may have to make a big deal out of it, but try a number of things along the way first before. I think court should always be the last resort because it's like going to Vegas thinking I'm going to buy a house after I come home from Vegas.
Right.
That sounds good, but I wouldn't, put all my hope in the gamble. And I think a lot of times that's exactly what court is. It's a big, giant gamble.
Very much.
So much of it depends on who your attorney is and who their attorney is and who the judge is and all of that. It's shocking to most parents once they go through it that they thought, wow, I thought someone was really going to advocate for my child. Well, so did the other parent.
Yes.
Right. So here's two people with two different perceptions of what being an advocate really means.
Right. Yeah. You've got your story and you've got your evidence, which is a narrative about the behavior of the other parent. Well, the other parent's attorney is going to have stories about you, whether they're true or not. And now the judge is sitting there with, two entirely different perspectives, having to make up a decision that probably or may not go well for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So to wrap this up, Mindy, I think probably you ought to let go of this issue for now and try some other things before you decide to make a big deal of it in court, because I think you have missed some steps. Would you agree with me, Rick?
Yes, I would.
Yeah. So try just letting him use whatever dentist, even if you have to drive 30 minutes. Unfortunately, what happened in court was that he got final say or power over this issue.
Right.
And talk to an attorney, but I think you have to have a lot of evidence to say he's not fit to have that kind of decision making. And I'm not sure you have, you may, but not in your email. And on the ADD thing, I think it's a matter of finding out what you can do for your daughter. How are you going to teach your daughter to manage her own issues and symptoms? And how are you going to be the hero for her to help her do that? Because it sounds like in the other house, that's not happening. And if it becomes so severe, she's failing every class, the teachers say we can't even have her in the class anymore because she's just so out of control, then maybe you have a more severe issue that you really do need help with the court. But unless and until it gets to that point, I think there's a lot of steps in between of how you can help her.
And here's a perspective shift, maybe. Look at it this way. Yeah, you get to spend an extra 20 minutes with your 10-year-old in a car where you could have some good conversations or just enjoy each other's presence, because by the time she's 16, 17, or 18, she's not going to be talking to you as much.
She'll be very happy because instead of spending the money on court, you bought her a car.
Right. Yeah.
And, there's that, right?
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thank you, Mindy, for your question. And I think that it was an important one and something I think it's very common that most of our listeners probably deal with.
Yes.
Okay. All right, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. The information contained in this podcast is generic. It must not be misconstrued as constituting legal or psychological advice. Decisions relevant to any specific individual, family system, or case require the direct evaluation of skilled, child-centered professionals.